Her eyes, her cheekbones, her hair, her boobs. Sarah sighed. "Shall I go on?" Oliver waved his pudgy little hand dismissively. "You're much prettier than she is, Sarah. I'll never forget the first time I saw you walking across Mason's yard. Nearly stopped my heart. If memory serves, I made quite a fool of myself back then." "You asked me to marry you. Several times, in fact." "My offer still stands." "I'm flattered, Ollie, but I'm afraid it's out of the question." "Am I too old?" "Not at all." "Too fat?" She pinched his pinkish cheek. "Just right, actually." "So what's the problem?" "I'm involved." "In what?" "A relationship." He seemed unfamiliar with the word. Oliver's romantic entanglements rarely lasted more than a night or two. "Are you talking about that bloke who drives the flashy Bentley?" Sarah sipped her drink. "What's his name, this boyfriend of yours?" "Peter Marlowe." "Sounds made up." "With good reason," thought Sarah. "What's he do for a living?" blurted Oliver. "Can you keep a secret?" "My darling Sarah, I have more dirty secrets stored inside my head than MI5 and MI6 combined." She leaned across the table. "He's a professional assassin." "Really? Interesting work, is it?" Sarah smiled. It wasn't true, of course. It had been several years since Christopher worked as a contract killer. "Is he the reason you came back to London?" probed Oliver. "One of the reasons. The truth is I missed you all terribly. Even you, Oliver." She checked the time on her phone. "Oh, hell. Will you be a love and pay for my drink? I'm late." "For what?" "Behave, Ollie." "Why on earth would I want to do that? It's so bloody boring." Sarah rose, and winking at Julian, went into Jermyn Street. The rain was suddenly coming down in torrents, but a taxi soon came to her rescue. She waited until she was safely inside before giving the driver the address of her destination. "Cheyne Walk, please. Number 43. 2. Cheyne Walk, Chelsea. Like Sarah Bancroft, Victor Orloff believed that life was a journey best taken without aid of a map. Raised in an unheated Moscow apartment shared by 3 families, he became a billionaire many times over through a combination of luck, determination, and ruthless tactics that even his apologists described as unscrupulous, if not criminal. Orloff made no secret of the fact that he was a predator and a robber baron. Indeed, he wore those labels proudly. "Had I been born an Englishman, my money might have come to me cleanly," he dismissively told a British interviewer after taking up residence in London. "But I was born a Russian, and I earned a Russian fortune." In point of fact, Victor Orloff was born a citizen not of Russia, but of the Soviet Union. A brilliant mathematician, he attended the prestigious Leningrad Institute of Precision Mechanics and Optics, and then disappeared into the Soviet nuclear weapons program, where he designed multi-warhead intercontinental ballistic missiles. Later, when asked why he had joined the Communist Party, he admitted it was for reasons of career advancement only. "I suppose I could have become a dissident," he added, "but the Gulag never seemed like a terribly appealing place to me." As a member of the pampered elite, Orloff witnessed the decay of the Soviet system from the inside, and knew it was only a matter of time before the empire collapsed. When the end finally came, he renounced his membership in the Communist Party and vowed to become rich. Within a few years, he had earned a sizable fortune importing computers and other Western goods for the nascent Russian market. He then used that fortune to acquire Russia's largest state-owned steel company and Rusoil, the Siberian oil giant. Before long, Orloff was the richest man in Russia. But in post-Soviet Russia, a land with no rule of law, Orloff's fortune made him a marked man. He survived at least 3 attempts on his life and was rumored to have ordered several men killed in retaliation. But the greatest threat to Orloff would come from the man who succeeded Boris Yeltsin as president. He believed that Viktor Orloff and the other oligarchs had stolen the country's most valuable assets, and it was his intention to steal them back. After settling into the Kremlin, the new president summoned Orloff and demanded 2 things: his steel company and Rusoil. "And keep your nose out of politics," he added ominously. "Otherwise, I'll cut it off." Orloff agreed to relinquish his steel interests, but not Rusoil. The president was not amused. He immediately ordered prosecutors to open a fraud and bribery investigation, and within a week they had issued a warrant for Orlov's arrest. He wisely fled to London, where he became one of the Russian president's most vocal critics. For several years, Ruzoil remained legally icebound, beyond the reach of both Orlov and the new masters of the Kremlin. Orlov finally agreed to surrender the company in exchange for 3 Israeli intelligence agents held captive in Russia. One of the agents was Gabriel Allon. For his generosity, Orlov received a British passport and a private meeting with the Queen at Buckingham Palace. He then embarked on an ambitious effort to rebuild his lost fortune, this time under the watchful eye of British regulatory officials who monitored his every trade and investment. His empire now included such venerable London newspapers as The Independent, The Evening Standard, and The Financial Journal. He had also acquired a controlling interest in the Russian investigative weekly Moskovskaya Gazeta. With Orlov's financial support, the magazine was once again Russia's most prominent independent news organization and a thorn in the side of the men in the Kremlin. As a consequence, Orlov lived each day with the knowledge that the formidable intelligence services of the Russian Federation were plotting to kill him. His new Mercedes-Maybach limousine was equipped with security features normally reserved for the state cars of presidents and prime ministers, and his home in Chelsea's historic Cheyne Walk was one of the most heavily defended in London. A black Range Rover idled curbside, headlamps doused. Inside were 4 bodyguards, all former commandos from the elite Special Air Service employed by a discreet private security firm based in Mayfair. The one behind the wheel raised a hand in acknowledgement as Sarah alighted from the back of the taxi. Evidently, she was expected. Number 43 was tall and narrow and covered in wisteria. Like its neighbors, it was set back from the street, behind a wrought iron fence. Sarah hurried up the garden walk beneath the meager shelter offered by her compact umbrella. The bell push produced a resonant tolling within, but no response. Sarah pressed the button a second time, with the same result. Typically, a maid would have answered the door, but Victor, a notorious germaphobe even before the pandemic, had slashed the hours of his household staff to reduce his odds of contracting the virus. A lifelong bachelor, he spent most evenings in his study on the 3rd floor, sometimes alone, often with inappropriately young female company. The curtains were aglow with lamplight. Sarah reckoned he was on a call. At least, she hoped he was. She rang the bell a 3rd time, and receiving no answer, laid her forefinger on the biometric reader next to the door. Victor had added her fingerprint to the system, no doubt with the hope their relationship might continue after the sale of the painting was complete. An electronic chirp informed Sarah that the scan had been accepted. She entered her personal passcode. It was identical to the one she used at the gallery, and the deadbolts snapped open at once. She lowered her umbrella, twisted the doorknob, and went inside. The silence was absolute. She called Victor's name, but there was no reply. Crossing the entrance hall, she mounted the grand staircase and climbed to the 3rd floor. The door of Victor's study was ajar. She knocked. No answer. Calling Victor's name, she entered the room. It was an exact replica of the Queen's private study in her apartment at Buckingham Palace, all except for the high-definition video wall that flickered with financial newscasts and market data from around the world. Victor was seated behind his desk, his face tilted toward the ceiling, as though he were deep in thought. When Sarah approached the desk, he made no movement. Before him was the receiver from his landline telephone, a half-drunk glass of red wine, and a stack of documents. His mouth and chin were covered in white foam, and there was vomit on the front of his striped dress shirt. Sarah saw no evidence of respiration. "Oh, Victor, dear God!" While at the CIA, Sarah had worked cases involving weapons of mass destruction. She recognized the symptoms. Victor had been exposed to a nerve agent. In all likelihood, so had Sarah. She rushed from the room, her hand to her mouth, and hurried down the staircase. The wrought iron gate, the bell push, the biometric scanner, the keypad, any one of them could have been contaminated. Nerve agents were extremely fast-acting. She would know in a minute or 2. Sarah touched one final surface, the knob on Victor's leaden front door. Outside, she lifted her face to the falling rain and waited for the first telltale rush of nausea. One of the bodyguards clambered from the Range Rover, but Sarah warned him to approach no closer. Then she dug her phone from her handbag and dialed a number from her preferred contacts.